It's no secret that Polaris Lance is the best exotic when doing Grandmasters in Season 23 of Destiny 2, but the question I have is, what build best complements using Polaris Lance? And in today's video, I think I found that exact build, and I know you might be thinking to yourself, it's Wellock, look, he's gonna say Solar Warlock. No, actually it's not, surprisingly. While Solar Warlock is of course always a good build, this build actually gives you more heals than a Solar Warlock. And not just for yourself, but for your entire team. Once you use this build one time, you're not going to want to take it off. So let me jump right in and explain every single thing about this so you understand why this is so potent and so powerful. We're talking about a Precious Scars Solar Titan build that gives us infinite restoration and healing for our teammates every single time we kill an enemy, which of course when you're using Polaris Lance, that's going to happen super easily and extremely often. Here's the exact build breakdown with the subclass. For the super, we're using Hammer of Soul. This has the best overall damage output for the Solar Super and allows us to throw our hammers from range so that way we can stay safe. For the class ability, we're going with the Towering Barricade to block some enemy incoming fire when we need to revive a teammate, which as a side note will actually give us restoration as well and create that crazy healing aura that we love from Precious Scars. For the jump Catapult Lift, I see so many Titans out there with high jump, don't let me catch you with high jump. And for the melee, I actually chose Hammer Strike instead of Baby Hammer because we're not using its Synthoset build and we're inside a Grandmaster. So if you get up in an ad's face and throw a Baby Hammer at it, you're going to get absolutely destroyed because that damage isn't there without Synthoceps. So that's why I instead chose Hammer Strike. I rarely ended up using my melee with this build, but occasionally I would shoulder charge a red bar thrall, causing an ignition, which is kind of fun. For the grenade, I went with a Thermite grenade. This grenade has the best damage output inside challenging endgame content, but if you wanted a little more heals, there's nothing wrong with using a healing nade instead. Next up for the aspects, we're going with the classic Roaring Flames. Final blows with solar abilities or ignitions increase the damage of your solar abilities. So something I would often find myself doing is throwing a Thermite grenade on the ground. If it were to kill a few enemies and I got Roaring Flames ×3, well then I would go in with my Hammer Strike and get that shoulder charge kill on a small pile of enemies. But really that's not the gameplay loop that we're looking for because we're just trying to sit back with the Polaris Lance and stay alive with infinite restoration. The last aspect I had on was Soul Invictus, which actually plays into our build well here because it reads here, defeating scorched targets creates sunspots, and due to our artifact mods, we will be creating sunspots with this. We unfortunately won't be able to stand in our sunspots as much as I would like though. I was trying to set this build up so that I could stand in a sunspot as much as humanly possible, gaining the benefits of restoration and abilities, but unfortunately due to the way Grandmasters are structured and you want to keep your distance from enemies, couldn't create sunspots at my own feet in order to do so with this particular build, but look forward to a future build where we do chill in those sunspots and reap the benefits, which is why you should be subscribed to the channel. Now let's move on to the fragments. The first one is going to be Ember of Empyrean. This fragment was absolutely massive for solo Warlord's Ruin. This paired with Sunshot made it very easy to maintain restoration and radiant throughout the entirety of the encounter in boss fight 1, 2, and 3, and the structure of this build utilizes that same power. We're going to pair with this, of course, Ember of Solace, my favorite thing to pair with Empyrean, and the reason why is that you'll actually see on the screen here, when I shoot an enemy with Polaris Lance without Solace, I only am given 3 seconds of restoration, whereas when I shoot an enemy with Polaris Lance with Solace, I'm given 5 seconds of restoration. Those extra 2 seconds are crucial because I need to get a kill with Polaris Lance within that time to extend that timer. Every kill I get with Polaris Lance, because of Ember of Empyrean, will extend that timer further for both restoration and radiant, and due to the fact that enemies are so much more beefy in Grandmasters, you're gonna need those extra 2 seconds, so I strongly recommend Solace for this build. This will make it so that you just have infinite restoration at all times, which is so much fun. You're basically a walking healing rift everywhere you go, and it does benefit your teammates as well. For the next 2 fragments, we went with the Ember of Singeing, which is your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. Obviously, we're scorching a ton of targets because we're spamming Polaris Lance everywhere, and due to our artifact mods, every single enemy we shoot will be getting scorched, and we'll go over that in just a moment. Lastly, we have Ember of Searing, which is defeating those scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. So this will give me more shoulder charge energy, and more importantly, it'll give me a fire sprite, and if I pick that up, that will grant me grenade energy. So i.e. scorching targets, shooting targets with my Polaris Lance gives me all 3 of my abilities back, my melee, my class ability, and my grenade, which creates a really nice ability loop for this build. But that's not even the best part of this build, because truly for this build, it's all about having having infinite restoration and radiant, so you can chill back with that Polaris Lance and just chip away at every single enemy from complete safety. Now let's do a breakdown of my weapons. Obviously I'm in the Grandmaster Strike Corrupted, so you're going to change things per each encounter, but because it has Stasis Surge, my fusion rifle in the kinetic slot is the Deliverance, so I get a plus 25% damage bonus to this. You could also use Riptide though if you want to be able to stun the Unstoppables. Just keep in mind though that Bungie did nerf Chill Clip, so it actually takes 3 bursts to freeze them. Once you break them free though, you will then stun the Unstoppables. I chose Deliverance though for just a little bit better damage output. The energy weapon of course is Polaris Lance. This thing is so extremely good and almost everyone has it because it's been in the game for so long. Sit back, hit headshots. Polaris Lance creates crazy explosions, refunds your ammo, scorches and ignites enemies, giving you radiant and restoration with this build. This is the Polaris Lance build that you need to use, especially if you're on a Titan. For the heavy ammo, I just went with a Briar's Contempt. You could use Cataclysmic, doesn't really matter. We always have a div on our team, so that way we can shoot Sadia a lot easier. She tends to move around and dodge quite a bit if you shoot rockets at her. Now breaking down the exotic and all of the mods we have on the helmet. Of course, we're using Precious Scars. Its exotic perk reads final blows with weapons with a damage type matching your subclass energy create a burst of healing around you that grants allies restoration. So because we're on a solar subclass and we're shooting a Polaris Lance, we are given restoration and our teammates are as well. And because we have Solus on, we're given 5 seconds instead of 3. And because we have Empyrean on, we can maintain restoration and extend that timer up to 12 seconds just by simply getting kills. The second part reads, after reviving or being revived, you gain an aura that provides overshields to you and nearby allies, and that aura is extremely powerful, and you'll find that utility to be amazing because people are going to die when you're doing a Grandmaster. It's just an extremely difficult activity. I've ran these Grandmasters hundreds if not thousands of times at this point in time, and the enemies are super lethal. Randomly one of those little darts will come out and hit you, or Sadia will launch you off the map. Your teammates are going to die, and when they do, Precious Scars is going to be the best option for you when you revive them. For the mods, like I've mentioned in all my GM builds, we want Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout, and the reason why we want this again is because we're shooting enemies with an exotic primary weapon, which causes Heavy Ammo Finder to proc significantly faster. And when Heavy Ammo Finder procs for you and all 3 of your teammates, which I recommend to have every teammate have this on, you will then also make a brick for everyone with Heavy Ammo Scout, and your teammates will as well, as long as all 3 of you have this on. And then of course lastly we're going to put on a Harmonic Siphon, so that way it matches our Polaris Lance, which is going to create an orb of power every time we get a kill with the weapon, which is the entire focus of this build, meaning orbs everywhere. Those are the 3 best mods for the helmet. Now it's time to move on to the gauntlets. We're going to go with Harmonic Loader, so that way that Polaris Lance reloads a little bit faster. Then I'm going to go with Bolstering Detonation and Momentum Transfer. Both of these are focused on my grenade doing damage to enemies, and because I have Thermite Grenade, it repeatedly goes out and comes back. It causes a lot of damage to enemies. It will kill the red bars, it will significantly damage majors, champions, and bosses, and every single time it gets a tick, it's going to be causing a cooldown for your melee and for your class ability. This is a really nice gameplay loop here to create a little more infinite ability spam for you. Moving on down to the chest piece for this build. For Grandmasters, I recommend Rainbow Resist, Arc, Solar, and Void. This way you'll have resistance from all the different damage types that are going to be consistently shooting you in the Grandmasters this season. And of course, we don't want melee damage resistance when we're using Polaris Lance because we're staying so far out of range that nothing is going to get that close to us. So we won't need this because this is based on proximity. And alternatively, while there isn't that much that shoots us, at least in the Corrupted GM that's solar, you could therefore swap out solar resistance for something like sniper damage resistance. But I find that a lot of those Taken Knights love to shoot fire on me, especially if I'm sitting in a well or wherever I'm at. They're just always shooting fire at me, and they have quite a bit of health. They're a little too tanky for me, so I put solar resistance on for them, at least from the Corrupted GM. But no matter what GMs come out, I'm pretty much just going to have this on at base each time I jump into a new GM this season. Moving on down to the boots now, we're going to go with Recuperation, of course, every time we pick up one of those orbs that we create from getting kills with our Polaris Lance. This is going to replenish our health, which is really nice. And then we're going to have 2 solar weapon surges. This is going to buff the damage of that Polaris Lance, making it feel like almost a power weapon. And on top of that, it's going to buff our heavy ammo weapon, which is Briar's Contempt, or for example, Cataclysmic, or even if you want to go with a rocket launcher, like Apex Predator, for example, double solar weapon surge is huge and makes it so that way you can actually mow through the ads a little bit easier. Lastly, we're going on down to the class item. For the class item, we're going to have time dilation, so that way our solar weapon surges last longer. And we're going to have powerful attraction on, so we can pick up nearby orbs just by putting down our Titan wall. And lastly, we will have bomb run, so we can get our grenade back a little bit faster. tying into that ability gameplay loop. And that's everything for the armor mods for this build. For the stats, of course, we want 100 resilience. We're on a Titan. We're in challenging endgame content. This is a must. After that, we're going to go with as much discipline as we can possibly get. Then after discipline, because we're getting infinite restoration, we really don't need that much strength. It would be much more advantageous to lean into as much intellect as possible. If I could, I'd have 100 resilience, 100 discipline, and 100 intellect for this build. Lastly, we need to break down the exact artifact perks that we're using to make this build so powerful and so potent. Of course, first off, we have Rays of Precision. Wall Radiant Solar Precision final blows cause combatants to ignite. This ties in perfectly when using Polaris Lance, so that's pretty easy choice right there. Then we have Revitalizing Blast, causing damage with solar ability, weakens champions and bosses for a short duration. Our Thermite Grenade will debuff enemies for a minus 15% debuff. On top of that, our Shoulder Charge will do the same as well, so be mindful of that. Feels like we're back in D1 where we used to debuff with Solar Titan. Anyone remember that? Any OG D1 veterans out there? Next up, we have Heart of the Flame, which reads casting your Solar Super, grants nearby allies Radiant, and increases the damage of your super for each nearby ally. So every time I pop my hammer, I'm going to give all of my teammates Radiant, and on top of that, my hammers are going to be that much more powerful. Next up, we have Torch, which is while Radiant, deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by strand and stasis debuffs. This is really nice, especially if you're rocking Riptide with Chill Clip. It's a very short timer for Torch, but it is a nice little buff to your weapon damage, so definitely one worth putting on. Next up, we have Flint Striker, which is rapid solar weapon precision hits and rapid solar weapon final blows grant Radiant. Now, obviously, we're going to get a ton of Radiant because we're just spamming Polaris Lance, which ties in perfectly to the next perk right here, which is Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants, which is perfect and ties into the fragments that we have on this build here, which is Ember of Singeing and Ember of Searing, because we're going to be scorching all those combatants with our Polaris Lance. The last three you're going to want on are From Whence You Came, so you do a little more damage to taken and scorned combatants. Wished Into Being is going to make you pop out a ton of orbs when you're near getting your super, if you get an ability kill, that is. So you got to get a Thermite Grenade kill or a Shoulder Charge kill, which shouldn't be that hard with Roaring Flames and the debuff that comes along with it due to Revitalizing Blast. And lastly, I had on Dragon's Bite, which is breaking combatant's shield with a strand or stasis weapon has a chance to suspend or freeze that combatant. Because we're using a stasis fusion rifle, if we break an enemy's shield, they might become just outright frozen from it, which ties in really well when using Torch here and will allow you to do a little more damage with your stasis weapons because they'll be affected by freeze, even when not using a Chill Clip fusion like the Deliverance here. And that is everything for this build. Try it out in the GM Corrupted this week and save it as one of your 10 loadouts so that way you have it in future GMs. If you want the exact link to copy and paste everything, all you have to do is look in the description. You'll find the dim link. You can click that and it will equip all of these items on your character. If you have any questions, feel free to comment those down below or come ask me on my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/lucky10p. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button, subscribe, and click on the screen here to watch another one from the channel. And if you're feeling thirsty out there, make sure to use code lucky10p to save some money on G Fuel. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitch and Kick. I go live all the time playing Destiny 2. Lastly, make sure you're following me on X, Instagram, and TikTok where I deliver Destiny 2 news to you daily. I appreciate all the followers out there.